Hey folks, how's it going? Thank you for checking out today's video. I'm Johnny and today I'm going to show you how you can get started using Power BI. If you'd like to follow along with today's video, all the data comes from IMDb. That's the Internet Movie Database if you don't know about it. It's an online resource with a load of really interesting information around movie and TV. The data is made publicly available to download and it's also refreshed daily as well, so it's kept up to date. If you go to imdb.com/interfaces, there's documentation on all the data that's available as well as a link to download it. Downloads will be a zip folder, and once you unzip that, the file inside it will be a .tsv file. And that stands for tab separated values, so it's a bit like a .csv file, which is comma separated values. It's just a different delimiter. That file format does still work in Power BI though. So here we are in Power BI desktop. The first thing we're going to do is go up to get data and we're going to select text/csv. Well, that's right. I'm going to so you see that once I come here, the same series values just up. And then we have query columns. And the average is up. And in terms of the information level size, anything will change. Can you think of that? What I'm going to do is change that. So this model, and see here that I've got some tested relationship tables. Okay, so to go to my testing app, one thing we might go to here on choice. So like that. We've got a few things going on, so rather than each one's having one error, we've got has a value, so some actions, sometimes like action prime or action potential. So I'll do an analysis around genres. So what we do, you know, column that is the primary genre, and across this option here, column. And so how they column in Power BI, we use the stats, which is the analysis sections. Okay, so that's what's all that this upstream, so call this primary genre. And what we're going to use here, so left, new genres, and what we're doing is search is first column. I'm also going to do subdivision 1. And the command so it's a example of a draw column one, it's not five, so very hundred, we've got plus left. So that's nice to do, minus 1 there, otherwise that left is going to be correlated to. So, same as that. And you've got one column here, if you just constant, we can all the genres same one. So, that's what we've got. So, first thing we'll look at is, let's see, who fills penny pens. So, do that here. So, let's contract, equals. Oh, yeah, equals axis. Okay, so, we're going to create filters to exclude everything from filters system. So, do that, so, my slide over here. We don't apply for storage. And then filters system. Let's look at the sort of genre, so in my prime genre concrete. Right, so we project there. So that's now serious value into the genre size. So we're going to make up here and for each to draw out, so of course. That's what I'm doing. That's a colour chart, that's a colour chart, just have a line chart under that chart, isn't it? Right in there. That's one of the other. So I can count them times, minus the average. But come down here, no, what's your average? So the reason for that is because of the next like, what happens on only section is the inlet section, so on the that's my volume. Good job. Yes, it's going to see which ones I have to so let's see. Oh, that one's. I've listened. But it's on the outside, so. Yeah, so every time it's average, so go here. Average. I don't know what ones that the task is really rare. What I just find is that some of the inheritance, I'm very converted for the hard because I really niche story theory and as a reverse. Let's see. And I'm also going to my top 10 films based on messages. So we'll do. Okay, I'm going to top filter. So top 10. Top 10 based on the other thing. So I'm also going to use this as well. So here. So this is yeah. So that's the report pretty much finished. So there you go, simple. That's how you can get up and running using Power BI. Whoa. Can we just back up a minute here? This isn't how Power BI report development works in real life.
For starters, that was way too quick. Now, just for giggles, I decided to record myself doing that very same report step by step, but without having to do the commentary. It took me just about 8 minutes. Now, in the real world, you don't just have an army of report analysts and data analysts churning out reports every 10 minutes or so, like some mystical enlightenment production line. I think that making out the process to create reports is this simple is actually doing a bit of a disservice to all those Power BI developers around the world who've put hours into honing their craft. Recently, Pereira, who runs a website called Data Pairs, did a blog report about her report development workflow. It's a really, really good article, and I'll put a link to it in the description. Now, there are 18 steps to this report development process. Granted, not all of them are necessarily compulsory, but I think that all of them are at least worth some thought when you are creating a report, and you at least need to consciously make the decision whether or not you're going to follow one of these steps or not. So it isn't just about grabbing a few flat files from somewhere and getting started dragging and dropping visuals onto a report canvas. It's actually quite a considered process to be an effective Power BI developer. The other thing that really, really annoys me about this style of tutorial that I've attempted to recreate today is just the number of shortcuts and bad practices that it seems to encourage. I've done a lot of research recently on Power BI training resources, looking at lots of online training that's available, things like YouTube tutorials and even some paid courses. Watch out for a blog I'm going to write about that coming soon. But one of the common themes that I have noticed is there's an awful lot of misinformation out there, and if you're brand new to Power BI and you're looking to learn, I can see how people might be led down the wrong path. Now, if we just consider my version of the tutorial today, there are various bad practices I'd want to call out. So, for example, there wasn't really any attempt to model the data properly. There wasn't any kind of concept of creating a dimensional model or a star schema. A consequence of that is that there wasn't, for instance, a proper date table contained in that particular model. I didn't try and use any friendly names, so I didn't try and change any of the columns to have a name that would be more meaningful to my users. Didn't hide or remove any of the superfluous columns. So, for example, there were columns that just got left behind in the report that didn't mean anything. Columns like the key columns should really be hidden in a report as well. I didn't assign data types, or at least it was very much an afterthought. So, for example, the running time being in text format rather than number, I just kind of bumbled through and changed it on the fly rather than considering what data should be in the model and defining it properly up front. I used implicit measures as opposed to explicit measures. So an implicit measure is when you just allow Power BI to work out the aggregations for you, as opposed to being explicit in terms of how your data should be aggregated. I used a calculated column using DAX, when really the correct practice would be to have added that column in Power Query in the query editor element of it. My visualization choices were pretty poor. There wasn't really any thought put into the best way to visualize that data for the people that are going to be consuming it. And the branding was kind of an afterthought. I chucked on an IMDb logo, but there wasn't really any attempts to tie that in with a wider IMDb kind of corporate theme. Lastly, were the results of the report even correct? That definitely, when I was sort of clicking through and looking at some of the examples, the fact that I was using that average of average, which always seemed like a bit of a dodgy practice anyway, but I'm not even convinced it was actually giving me the correct results anyway. So yeah, loads of really, really, really bad practices in there. If you spotted any others, let me know in the comments. Now, if you are new to Power BI, a lot of that terminology I just used is probably gobbledygook. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that if you're learning a tutorial as a beginner, you should still be being introduced to some of these terms, and they still deserve a mention, even if you don't go into full depth on them. Now, there's a time and a place for a quickly hacked together report, and I guess if you're just doing an ad hoc analysis, then taking some of these shortcuts is okay. However, if it's something that you're looking to scale and share with a wider audience, you really ought to be trying to adopt best practices. And the thing that worries me about some of the online tutorials that you see, and even some of the paid courses, things like dashboard in a day courses that you see knocking about, is they kind of normalise these shortcuts and make them seem as if they're an acceptable way to do report development. So over on Twitter, I came across this little quote which really tickled me. So this is from Power BI Guy, when he talks about the fact that maybe we shouldn't call it dashboarding in a day, let's call it report in a rush instead. He makes a fair point. Now I get it. We want to make out that Power BI is accessible and that it's easy to use. We don't want to scare people away. But I guess the point I want to make is that if you're serious about a career in Power BI, then you really, really need to go deep on it. There's all sorts of nuance in terms of the best ways to get the most from the product. There's all sorts of best practices that you really ought to familiarise yourself with. Fortunately, there is a great community around the product. There's a plethora of websites, blogs, YouTube channels and forums that can help you on that journey to really go deep and learn how to do Power BI well. So there you have it. I guess that's my little rant about some of the state of Power BI training that's available out there. What do you think? If you've got any comments or any feedback, do slide into that comment section below. If you have enjoyed today's video, do of course give it a thumbs up. And if you want to follow along for more information around Power BI, please do subscribe to the channel. Thanks once again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.